Mario Kart 64 is often considered to be one of the lower points of the series, due mostly to the fact that it was one of the earliest entries and is relatively unevolved. I think for me though, this game will always be important if for no other reason than Wario's priceless voice lines. You can say whatever you like about Mario Kart 64, but to me, this will always be an important game, you know, it's immortal, like the Queen. That being said, there are numerous areas where the game shows its age and there's really no use in pretending that there aren't, which is why I want to talk about two projects today that, in very different but very effective ways, bring Mario Kart 64 up to a much higher standard. It's always such a nice thing to see these old games be supported by the fans in such a big way, so I gotta pay big respects whenever I see it. Bigly. The first one I want to talk about is perhaps the most insane texture pack I have ever seen for a video game. It's called Mario Kart 64 HD, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's an HD texture pack for Mario Kart 64, and it's pretty dang phenomenal. Usually I wouldn't make a video on a texture pack, not because I hate them or anything like that. I mean, we've seen some pretty impressive stuff on that front, but I typically care mostly about gameplay features like new levels, characters, or items. But I'm making an exception for this one because the effort that went into it is absolutely ridiculous. In case you're not familiar with how Mario Kart 64 handles graphics, it goes a little bit something like this. Since it was a very early N64 title, they didn't really know how to fully harness the power of the beast yet, so to ensure that this spicy new 3D racing game could maintain consistent performance, they cheated. Having 3D models for all 8 characters at once would impact performance too much, and if you don't believe me, go and dig up Diddy Kong Racing and see how well it runs. So instead of having 3D models for all the racers, they instead created a very complex and comprehensive sequence of pre-rendered sprites for every single character, converted from renders of high poly models that they probably had on a big beefy graphics workstation, and if any of this sounds familiar, this is pretty much the same thing that Rare did to make Donkey Kong Country look as good as it does. Now, if this process sounds tedious, that's because it very probably is, and if you've been putting the pieces together, you might have guessed that, in fact, yes, in order to make this HD texture pack, they basically had to do that exact thing from scratch, which, from what I understand, meant creating new models altogether, just to meticulously render them at 3 billion different angles for different poses each, and then pose them all in a really epic way to recreate the title screen, so, yeah, that's a lot of work. And for some reason, it was also a lot of work to get it working too. I don't know if I'm just cursed or something, but I had way more trouble getting this to work than I think I should have. Tedious and exhausting stuff aside, the results definitely speak for themselves. Visually, this is really above and beyond. Every single part of this game has been brushed up to a much higher standard. When you first played Mario Kart 64 on the original N64 on a busted up CRT, this is probably what it looks like in your head. The character models are exceptionally sharp, while still remaining entirely faithful to the original designs. Environmental textures are far richer, roads have much more roughness, the secondary details like trees and cows look impossible for an N64 title. The shells look awesome, I mean, look at them. You really feel like you're gonna end somebody's entire existence with those things. The UI has been fully revamped. Those letters are the best letters I have ever seen. They're so good that if you used them to teach the alphabet to kids, they would all grow up to be the next Mozart. For me, the difference between the original and this is like the difference between Earthworm Jim 3D's N64 version versus its PC version. Not that Earthworm Jim is a particularly good benchmark for graphics, you know, I don't even know why I brought it up. It is worth noting that you probably won't notice the difference unless you play in a relatively high resolution, but you probably figured that out anyway. Fundamentally, it is worth reiterating that the game is entirely unchanged, but playing it with these brushed up graphics is refreshing, and it also doesn't cost $70. I can easily recommend this to anyone who wants a brushed up Mario Kart 64 experience and has the patience to work out all the HD texture emulation. The other hack we're talking about today is called Mario Kart 64 Hooting Time, and if that sounds like a funky, memey type of ROM hack, that's because it is, but it also happens to be a surprisingly effective piece of work for bringing the game up to modern standards. Right off the bat, we got 16 characters. Now that's a roster right there. Not unlike the HD texture pack, I imagine porting these characters was a lot of tedious work, so I gotta hand it to them for that. But you can play as Banjo, so it's all worth it in the end. Waluigi, Toadette, Crash Bandicoot, all of these classic Mario characters, setting aside their differences to race each other. But I think my favorite character has gotta be Kamek / Magic Koopa / whatever this thing is called these days, I have no idea. In case you're not familiar with Mario Kart 64's beta, this character was actually supposed to be in the game originally, but was replaced with Donkey Kong, so that's a little fun fact for yous. If Magic Koopa is in a race, even if you didn't notice at first, you'll know by the end because the voice lines are just hilarious. I think they're taken from Mario Galaxy, and for some odd reason, they are way louder than every other character, and I find that hilarious on a primal level. Gameplay-wise, all the new characters seem to have their own unique stats like the base characters. The items are mostly the same, except you got a feather now, which allows you to jump over things, like in the original Super Nintendo game. The UI has been updated to be far more compact, but without sacrificing any of the pertinent information. Menus now have way more personality and detail, just to give it some extra flair. You can actually name yourself when you play, presumably for scoreboard purposes. One of my favorite things is how you can skip the cutscene for the race results by holding A. Unskippable cutscenes or sequences are a big point of frustration in pretty much any game they're in, so it's always nice to have the option to skip them. I think for me though, the best thing about this game has to be the 200cc mode. Cranking this game up to 200cc results in an element of extreme chaos and insanity that just isn't there in the original game. This is the thing that Mario Kart has become famous for in recent years, so this is a very necessary step for bringing it up to modern standards. The chaos is so ridiculous at times that it almost feels unfair, but the sick truth of Mario Kart is that this is actually the thing that makes the game so fun. Because it's so brutal and unrelenting in its barrage of chaos that you just have to start laughing even if it's at your own expense. And this game not only delivers on that exact premise, but it also lets you play as Banjo. At the end of the day, it is very nice to see that people still remember this game fondly enough to go to the intense, painstaking trouble to bring it up to modern standards. Between these projects and the Mario Kart Amped Up project I spoke about before, I really do think Mario Kart 64 can be cranked up to become something very special. The original title is elderly and dated in many respects, but it doesn't have to be that way forever. And perhaps with the ROM hacking scene continuing to grow, it will cease to be. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching my video.